Levi in Florida wants to know if a fine-tuned universe provides evidence for some sort of design. So welcome, Levi. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay. Before I start, I just want to say thanks for what you do. I appreciate that you encourage people to think about why they believe what they believe, and that obviously doesn't happen enough these days. So, but just thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Anyways, at least at the start, this isn't coming necessarily from a Christian perspective.
Sure.
This is more of a basic question. I'm assuming you've heard of a fine-tuned universe or that sort of argument?
Yes. Many times.
Okay.
Indeed.
Then with that, what is your response to a fine-tuned universe argument? Do you see it as evidence for design in the universe, whether it be maybe there's a multiverse before us, or do you see, I mean, I don't think a God, obviously, but do you see that as being evidence that there is something before the Big Bang?
I don't. No.
First of all, I don't see any reason to think that the universe is fine-tuned. I think that's a mistake. That is one of those things about looking at around the world and saying, wow, I really, really fit the world. It must have been specifically created with me in mind, when the truth is all of the evidence that we have points to the notion that human beings evolved to fit the universe that we have. And so when we talk about fine-tuning, and I realize that there's a distinction between fine-tuning and the anthropic principle, and I don't want to conflate them with just a simple response about, oh, it seems fine-tuned for me. My question is, my first question when somebody brings up fine-tuning is, what is it that the universe is fine-tuned for? I mean, I'll go back to the quote from Stephen Hawking that says the universe is, if it's fine-tuned for anything, it's for the creation of black holes. But what is it that the universe is fine-tuned for? And how do we know that it could have been any other way?
I actually have another quote from Stephen Hawking, funny enough.
Cool.
It goes on to say, the laws of science as we know them at present contain many fundamental numbers, like the size of electric charge of the electron and the ratio of the masses of the proton and the electron. He goes on to say, things like this, the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers are at very, very finely adjusted numbers to make possible the development of life. And, for example, and this sort of topic has somewhat broad, I don't know.
I'm confused because you were presenting another quote from Stephen Hawking, and I don't know.
It's one long one, and I didn't need to go through the whole thing.
But you do realize that in his final book, he basically argued that there's no possibility for God in our universe, right? But let's just set all that aside, because that would be a fallacious appeal to authority, because Stephen Hawking isn't necessarily authority on God. And so it gets back to the issue of, what do we mean when we say the universe is fine-tuned? What's it fine-tuned for? How can you tell? And what were the other options? Because if I tune a guitar, I can show you other options, and I can tune it in many different ways. But if I have a stick, I can't tune a stick. It just is what it is. And so when we look at the universe and we say, oh, it appears to be fine-tuned, how is that not just us arrogantly assuming that we were an intended creation, rather than just recognizing what appears to be what the facts point to, which is the universe is what it is and may not have been possible to be any other way?
Right. Some examples of numbers that need to be pretty specific is
I kind of feel like you didn't listen to any.
Yeah, you didn't pick up on that at all. The
whole wanted to keep right on going with your numbers from Stephen Hawking. Sure. So please continue.
Or
no, continue. You have a sermon. Let's get to it so we can dispense with it.
Okay. Details that I just find, or that need to be specific, such as ratio of electromagnetic sources to gravitational force. For example, if the universe were spreading at any faster or any slower of a rate with gravity, it would have been a lot shorter of a lifespan, would have collapsed very quickly. And all these things, I don't need to go on.
Yeah, you don't. You absolutely don't, because none of it makes any difference, and none of it addresses the question I asked. It's just what you needed to finish so that you didn't lose track of your script. Because no matter how You can say all day, well, if this was a little bit different and this was a little bit different, the universe wouldn't exist. So what? It's not different, and there's no demonstration that it could be different. And until there's a demonstration that it could be different, you cannot even suggest that any tuning, let alone fine tuning, has been done. That's my point.
Do you see there being any reason that it wouldn't be any other way? I mean, I guess that's a funny question. Or another perspective I've heard is, like if a tornado went through a junkyard, could a Boeing 747 come out from the other side of the tornado, and sort of all these elements in the universe coming out to...
It's like you're not even listening.
Yeah, it's not clicking.
Okay. I'm not.
Levi. It's just
I'm not following. Yeah, it's not clicking. You're right. You're right.
no, and I don't think it's intentional. It's just it's boggling your mind. As an example, if I take a regular die, 6-sided dice, I roll one of them, and it comes up a 1, and I look at that and I say, wow, that's evidence that it's finely tuned. It could have been a 2, it could have been a 6, but it's a 1, and I now know that it's a 1. And we live in a universe where things worked out in such a way that we live and that we're sentient and we can actually question about the universe. If things had come up a different way, we wouldn't be here. That doesn't mean that it's finely tuned. It just means that it worked out in such a way that you and I are here. That's it.
But the other aspect of this is, in Phil's example, we know there are other options on that die.
Yes.
With the universe, we don't know that there could have been any other options. What evidence do you have, Levi, that the universe could have possibly been that any constant, any of those numbers, all of those things that you find really extraordinary, what evidence do you have that they could have been any other way?
So I guess with that question as a follow-up, do you find that the universe is not
Levi,
having...
I asked you a question. I am not,
Right.
if you're not going to listen and think and respond, why the fuck should I?
Right. And can you repeat the question again?
The universe, take any of those constants, those factors, those numbers that you want to point to as extraordinary, that they are what they are. Do you have any evidence that any of them could have been different?
No.
Yeah. So,
All right.
great. Thank you. I love you. You're now my favorite caller of all day, just for saying that. Here's the thing. And I agree with you. If we don't have evidence that it could have been any other way, then clearly it is impossible for us to ever reach a conclusion that it was in fact fine-tuned. Because if something can't be shown to be one of many possible things, then there can't have been any tuning.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have evidence that it could have been different, we don't have evidence that it could have been fine-tuned. I'm not saying it wasn't. I want to be very clear here, Levi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying the universe isn't fine-tuned. I'm not saying it wasn't fine-tuned. It's the people who are claiming that it was don't have evidence to support that. And you and I don't have any evidence that could the gravitational constant have been any different? I don't know. I don't have any evidence that it could have been. But in any case, even if it could have been, let's assume for a second that you did have evidence that it could have been a different way. So here's scenario 1. It couldn't have been any other way. Then there's no fine tuning. Scenario 2, it could have been a different way, but it came up this way. How do we demonstrate that it came up this way as a result of tuning or intent rather than chance? Well, what a lot of people are trying to do is say, oh, it's incredibly unlikely. Let me run the numbers. The problem with that is that no matter how unlikely it is, it definitely happened.
Yes.
Now, did it happen because a god cheated and made it that way, or did it happen coincidentally? Well, if there's infinitely many possible universes and things like that, then it's infinitely many is a mistake because it's not a quantity. But there's nothing about this that suggests that there is a fine tuner as an agent, because you'd have to rule out chance. But before you can even rule out chance, you have to show that it could have been anyway. We have exactly one universe. We don't have any other universes to compare it to. We don't have any way of looking prior to the universe. We don't have any way of looking outside the universe. We don't even know if prior to the universe or outside of the universe are concepts that make any sense. Did you follow all of that?
I did.
So my answer to your question, do I think that a fine-tuned universe provides evidence for some form of design? Yes. If you could demonstrate that a universe is in fact finely tuned, you would be demonstrating an agency tuning and defining and designing it. But we don't have a universe that is demonstrably fine-tuned. And even amongst possible different universes, the fact that this one arose doesn't mean that tuning was involved. Tuning is something you have to demonstrate, that this was an intended plan and not accidental and not necessary, like it had to happen this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you think that, or do you think that this is the only way the universe could have came out? I guess this is more.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I got no idea.
I don't know how anybody could know that.
Right. And
it's frustrating for me because here's something to think about, Levi, and that's this. If there were a God and that God wanted us to know that it existed, it could very clearly demonstrate that to all of us. And if a God fine-tuned a universe, it could inform us of this so that we could know whether or not the universe was fine-tuned. But that hasn't happened, which means either that God doesn't exist or that God doesn't want us to have the answers to those questions. Either way, all of those people claiming that the universe is fine-tuned and this is proof of God are clearly wrong.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Levi.
About that for a while. So
yeah, think about it. Give us a call back when you come up with anything else. Thanks, man.
I like how he turned that around and started listening. I really impressed.
I'm not kidding. When I say I love Levi and that's my favorite call of the day, it is. Yeah. People who watch the shows regularly know that my biggest point of frustration is if I ask a question and they don't answer it, because that's what happens when you're waiting for your turn to talk and you're on a particular script. And I understand. And by the way, you guys can write down notes and you can plan out things ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about losing your train of thought.
And you can call another time unless you get blocked. But someone like Levi, who's willing, it took a little bit, but he got to the point where he could pause, not look at his script if he has one, listen to what's being said. And I love the delay in the responses because it means he's thinking about it.
Yeah.
He's considering it. That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well done, Levi.
Yep. And it's one of those things, I've hosted this show for 16 years.
Yeah.
I know when somebody's not listening. I know when somebody was just waiting for their next opportunity to speak, and I get it, especially you doing call-ins, but this isn't like most radio call-in shows. If you call into your local radio station, you're going to get to speak for 30 seconds to a minute tops if you're lucky, and then they're going to put you back on hold and they're going to talk without you, and you may not get back on.
It's one of the most valuable things I've learned from the show over the years, and I think where some of the callers might have a problem is that their interaction with normal people in the real world, not a call-in setting like this, they can talk to somebody and they can run through all of the steps, all of the scenarios, and then get to the conclusion, and the other person just honestly doesn't know what to say because they might not just give a shit about the argument. Where here, the very first time they say something that's fallacious or wrong or unknowable or unprovable, we are likely to point that out right there and then. Yeah. And they can get very frustrated because they're used to laying out these 3 or 4 or 5 steps and reaching a conclusion. And we can't get to that point. And you've said this before, and I've learned from this myself. If you let them get to the point and you say, okay, now I want to go back and address the problem with that you said in point 1. Right. And then they will say, that's not what I said. And so you have to go very meticulously, point by point by point. And when you do that, a lot of them get stuck because they don't know the deeper meaning of what they're saying. They're just repeating something. And like our first caller, if that isn't what helped get you into Christianity, what makes you think that would work for anybody else? And the other thing, and I love the callers, if you can talk to Jesus or God, ask what to say.
Yeah. Have Jesus give you a hand.